On the early maps of North America, the edges of the colonies were drawn with shaky hands, not because the cartographers lacked skill, but because the frontier itself was unstable, a place where law faded, certainty vanished, and survival became a matter of instinct rather than order. This was the world where a disturbing and largely forgotten economy took shape, one in which human skin, specifically the skin from the top of the head, became a form of currency. An economy that flourished not in darkness, but in broad daylight, under the approval of governments that later pretended it had never existed. Millions grew up believing a simple story. Native Americans, wild and frenzied, tearing scalps from helpless settlers. Hollywood repeated it so often it solidified into myth. But the truth is far less convenient and far more unsettling. Because when you peel away a century of propaganda, what you discover is not a tale of savage tribes attacking innocent colonists, but a deeply entangled system of violence, politics, and profit in which every side had blood on its hands. Before Europeans ever arrived, some indigenous tribes practiced scalping. That much is true. But it was not what people imagine today. It was rare. It was ceremonial. It was symbolic. Not a weapon of terror, but a ritual tied to honor and the spirit world. And here is a fact almost no one knows. Many major tribes, Cherokee, Navajo, most Iroquois nations, did not scalp at all. But then Europeans arrived, and everything changed. To them, the continent was not a homeland. It was a battlefield, another arena for their global conflict. England, France, Spain, all fighting for territory, alliances, and control. They needed proof their native allies had killed enemy combatants. Heads were too heavy, bodies too cumbersome. But scalps? Portable, recognizable, unmistakable. And so a sacred ritual was suddenly assigned a price. By the early 1700s, colonial governments issued official bounty proclamations, printed, stamped, and displayed in public. £100 for the scalp of a warrior, 50 for a woman, 25 for a child. The idea is horrifying now, but then it was policy. Frontier militias learned quickly. Many were poorly paid, poorly trained, and scalps offered a shortcut to wealth. Indigenous or not, friend or foe, anyone could become a target if a bounty was on the table. One Pennsylvania militia slaughtered a peaceful group of Conestoga natives, families, children, mistaking them for hostiles. The governor knew they were innocent, yet he paid the bounty anyway, praising the militia for their service. And the darkness deepened. Some militias even killed white settlers and presented their scalps as indigenous to claim the reward. The frontier's chaos covered their crimes like fog over the tree line. Greed blurred identity. Fear blurred morality. And in this shadowed economy, a horrifying marketplace emerged. Meanwhile, tribes that had never practiced scalping began adopting it, not out of tradition, but out of survival. Europeans demanded proof. Europeans offered payment. Europeans turned the scalp into a receipt of loyalty or violence. Hollywood later rewrote the entire story. In cowboy films, the villain always wore feathers. The hero always rode west with righteousness in his saddlebag. But the historical record contradicts nearly every frame of that fantasy. European armies, militias, and mercenaries often scalped more people than indigenous warriors ever did, by overwhelming margins. And the indigenous raids that did occur, they were often retaliation, responses to massacres funded by colonial governments. As the United States expanded across the continent, scalp bounties slowly faded, not because morality suddenly prevailed, but because they were no longer necessary. The machinery of conquest had evolved. Other methods replaced the old ones. But the myth endured. America preferred a cleaner narrative. Brave settlers, savage tribes, civilization triumphant. The truth that governments had placed price tags on human heads, including those of children, did not fit that story. So the truth was buried, hidden behind dime novels, Western films, patriotic folklore, and silence. But silence doesn't erase what happened, because scalping was never a symbol of indigenous savagery. It became widespread only after Europeans industrialized it, turned it into a market, an incentive, a weapon of policy. This is not a story of good versus evil. It is the story of what happens when fear finds a buyer, when governments turn death into currency, and when war makes everyone complicit. If you strip away the legends, peel back the myths, and confront the truth with open eyes, you're left with a reality America has never wanted to face. Scalping flourished not because indigenous warriors invented it, but because colonial powers paid for it. Death became business. Business became policy. Policy became history. And the blood on those scalps belonged to everyone.